Continue our breakfast show with a quick look at education in Egypt, but not today, thousands of years ago. So to shed more light on this issue, we are very much delighted to have with us Mr. Samir Abbass, our historian and researcher. Thank you very much for being with us, sir, and a very good morning.
Good morning, I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah, let's start immediately because this is a very exciting topic regarding education. And we all know that when it comes to technology, to science, to education, all these words were very important in the Egyptian old civilization in general. Tell me more.
So for the ancient Egyptian civilization, there was no way to come to that advance and to be the most famous and the most resilient civilization in the ancient world without having a proper education system. So unfortunately, we don't have much details about the daily life of the ancient Egyptians, but the echo of civilizations is give us a proof that they have a very organized education system. But there is some misunderstanding and there is some debates about this education system, because from maybe we think that most of the ancient Egyptians, they were well educated and they were able to read and write. They were had a high rate of literacy. But what we found so far is proving completely the opposite, which is a very interesting fact. That's only possibly 2 to 5% of the ancient Egyptian people, they were able to read and write. They were well educated, which is mean that the ancient Egyptian civilization that was led by a very few people, 2 to 3% or 5% in the most case, to lead a big population, which is considered the most condensed or the biggest population in the ancient world back in that time, to lead them to civilizations which is we know it as today, which is a very interesting fact. Another common mistake, which is sometimes researchers actually doing, is looking at the ancient Egyptian civilization as one episode. The ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years. A very long period of time. And nowadays, there is a huge difference in policies and character between...
But sir, let me interrupt here just to speak about the percentages you have just given, because this is really, for me, a little bit weird and shocking.
Yeah, shocking, yeah.
Because then who wrote all these, let's say, scripts on the temples, on the walls?
That was a very good question.
Those
because
2%, I mean, they did all of this? Just 2 or 3% of the whole population?
I mean, that's a very intelligent question, because you are talking about the decoration on the temple and the text which is written on the temple. Actually, it is not written, it is engraved. And to be an artist in ancient Egypt, you don't have to read and write. Most of the artists in ancient Egypt who decorated the temples and the tombs, they were not able to know what they are writing, but they were copying. They were drawing these drawings, which is the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, is like mainly drawings. They were drawing that from textbooks.
But if I am not able to read them, I may have mistakes regarding the letters.
It happens.
Very rare.
Yes, but it happens.
Very rare.
It happens, yes.
So, is it possible?
Yes, and they had a system to correct these mistakes. One of the most valuable assets we have is the unfinished tombs and unfinished temples. So, for example, like Tawisrit and Setnach tombs, KB14 in the Valley of the Kings, when you go to the innermost part, is left unfinished. So, in the unfinished part, you see how the process of finishing this art. First, there is an artist which is not needs to be able to read and write. They go and copy these drawings and these writings from a text or from a copy book he has, and then after that we find somebody, a scribe, which is he knows the language, he comes and correct if there is a mistakes, and normally we see that with the red ink. Then the artists who engrave these writings or these shapes, they comes to engrave with these chisels later on.
But on the other side of the coin, we can find someone who can be an architect, an engineer, a philosopher.
Within the 5%.
Okay, within the 5%.
Within the 5%.
I mean, to wear all these hats at a time?
So I'm afraid to say that is the ancient Egyptian society was kind of a class system.
Yeah.
Okay, and the class system was also preserved in the education system. Who have the chance to be well educated in ancient Egypt? That was, of course, the kings, royalties, noblemen, and high officials and priests in the temples, which is mean that their sons and their families also will have a privilege and have an access to the education. But if that's like a solid fact, which is there is no leaks,
I mean, there was a keenness from the Egyptian kings to have this percentage all the time to be able to continue with building the civilization. True?
That will take us to another point, because looking at the ancient Egyptian civilization as one episode. No, we have different periods. You know, every 200-300 years, a different period with a different character. For example, so if this percentage, it was like 2 to 3% in the Old Kingdom, most probably it rise to 6 to 7% in the New Kingdom. Why?
Okay.
Because in the New Kingdom, it became like an empire buildings with a border. This empire reached up to Iraq and Turkey and the heart of Sudan. And this vast empire needs sophisticated administration and governmental offices to record all of these details and all of these incomes, which has come from these states.
I mean, sir, we are still learning from the ancient Egyptian civilization astronomy, for example,
Yes.
mathematics.
Let's take an example.
Okay.
Imhotep. Okay, Imhotep, one of the most famous intellectuals, you know, and Imhotep, in my point of view, he was one of the exceptions of the norms of the ancient Egyptians. That's
This
what
is it. And by the way, Imhotep is the one whom I was thinking
Yes.
about when I said that he was so and so and so and so. When
That's why I'm
so
saying
many
that you're
hats.
reading my minds when it comes to that. So as I mentioned earlier, that you know it was mainly a class system which is preserved for the highly educated people, for the high officials and priests and so on, and their families. But on the other hand, there was a chance for intellectuals, for innovators, you know, to leak into the system, and there was very few examples, but very successful examples. One of them in Imhotep in the Old Kingdom, and another example is Ka in the New Kingdom.
Yeah.
Both of them, they were proud that they are coming from a communal background.
Ka?
But Ka, his name is Ka.
Means spirit?
No, means soul.
Soul?
Soul, yes.
Ka and Ba, it's okay.
It's like
Great.
that's a completely different topic. The
Okay.
difference between Ka
Yeah.
and Ba. But yeah.
Are you telling me that the Egyptians did not know how to read and write, or were not
Most of them,
educated,
yes. Yeah.
but they knew how to choose, for example, the names of their children, and
Definitely.
they knew that Nefertiti, it's Al-Gamila, Atat, the beauty
Yes,
came,
yes.
Nefertari, and to use the word Nefer, for example, because it refers to beauty, to call their, or to name their children or their girls in specific after
Yes.
that,
The
or this
spoken
is a
language,
kind of,
yeah,
of being, let's say, civilized without being educated.
So, you know, so they were civilized for sure, and they have an oral traditions and oral education. But on the other hand, to write down this oral education was very complicated. The ancient Egyptian language was one of the very complicated languages of the ancient time. So it was written in hieroglyphics. And you know how complicated hieroglyphic is, and hieroglyphics, by the way, was not the common way of writing down their daily memories. It was hieroglyphics, which is like a shorthand way of writing down their spoken language. It was then demotics later on, and then Coptic later on.
Yep.
Okay, so there are 4 different ways of writing down the same language. To give you to be able to read and write hieroglyphics, you need to memorize at least 1,000 symbols. Okay, and this is only for hieroglyphics, and hieroglyphics was only used for decoration, not even for most of the text which is written on papyrus back in that time, which is that mean that you need to go to hieroglyphics. And hieroglyphics and demotics, that was another level of complications, you know, because it's handwriting, which is you need to get use of the person which you're writing to figure out, especially that many of the symbols looks like each other. So that's one of the main reasons why writings, their language was very complicated in ancient Egypt, and for that the schools was extremely strict. So if you grow up in a school, like I grew up in a school in public school, so copying lots of text, that was a tradition which is we having today from the ancient Egyptians, you know, like learning by copying lots of text like homework, and physical punishments with cans in the schools, that was also originated in ancient Egypt to enforce or give incentives to the children to learn. So, but and also at the same time, that's why the scribe, the title scribe for the ancient Egyptian was extremely important, because that means that he's able to read and write, he can teach himself, he can read, he can have an access to material, and that's why almost every high officials and some of the royal members, they have the title of scribe. Another surprising fact, which is I don't like to say it, is girls education in ancient Egypt. There is few examples of very successful girls education, but unfortunately there was not many of them.
Well, let's meet in another episode, and
Yes,
we are going to discuss
to have another episode.
if 50% of the Egyptians were very well educated.
We will be traveling out of the galaxy now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I think it would be that easy to find our civilization on Mars or Jupiter.
Yes, definitely.
Well,
Definitely.
Mr. Samir Abbass, thank you very much for your input.
It's a pleasure of mine.
Have a very
The
good
pleasure
day.
is mine.
Well, by this we come to the end of our episode. We had the honor to have Mr. Samir Abbass, our historian and researcher, and we are going to continue following up minute by minute all the activities in New York as Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati is continuing to have